continuing from where I was, we were in Pakistan, and I was there with my husband and my two children. One was 7, one was 2, and we'd gone there for a month on holiday to meet my in-laws. Within a couple of days of getting there, it was a complete nightmare. I absolutely hated it. And I'd been a couple of years before, so I knew that I really didn't like it there. So within a couple of days, I was saying, there's no way I can live here. It's literally 40 people screaming and shouting till 3 o'clock in the morning. The children are up running around. It was absolutely awful, living nightmare. I was ill with cholera because my sister-in-law had purposely fed me dirty water. My children were ill. The youngest had upset tummy, food poisoning, non-stop diarrhea. His bum was red and sore. The 7-year-old was barely eating anything. He hated the food there, but all our food was stolen. I had 40 sachets of porridge which completely vanished into thin air. And every time I asked somebody, have anybody seen the porridge packets? They'd turn around and said, oh, you probably left it in the UK. You probably forgot to bring it. Or it's probably in this drawer. It's probably in that drawer. Have you left it there? Have you left it there? I was like, I was going crazy. Like, they purposely wanted me to go crazy. And I say to them that, I unpacked it this morning from the suitcase. I remember unpacking these packets, and there was 40 of them. I knew my son would struggle to eat because he's a fussy eater. He barely ever wants to eat anything that he's not familiar with. But they just laughed at me. They mocked me. They would speak in Hinko, purposely in Hinko, because they knew I couldn't speak Hinko. I understood bits and pieces, but I'm not fluent in Hinko. I understand Urdu, so I would communicate with them in Urdu, which I've taught myself to speak. But they purposefully would leave me out of conversations, purposely sit in front of me and actually just speak in Hinko and not in Urdu. And I'd have to ask them, can you translate it for me, please, because I don't understand. And they, from the minute I got there, they made me feel like an outsider. They made sure I knew that I wasn't welcome there. The teenagers, there was about 5 or 6 teenagers, who would stand in front of me and laugh and mock me and laugh at the way I talk, laugh just at everything. A couple of them would be standing next to me sniggering, or behind my back sniggering, or making faces at each other. Just so rude and unbelievable that people would treat other people like this. And bearing in mind that I'd been 3 years before, and I loved those kids to bits. I fed them, I looked after them, I took gifts for them. I was amazing to these kids, and now they've 3 years later, they're just treating me like shit, and I had no idea why. I did not understand at all. It wasn't until later, I think, when I came back, and hints that my husband gave, that they had found out that I was married previously, that I was a divorcee with 2 children when I married him, which they hadn't previously known. So all of a sudden, I'm not worthy of respect. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of being in their house. How dare I turn up at their doorstep? How dare I marry their son? I'm not worthy of him. And they'd make comments like, you should be so grateful. You've got a handsome, good-looking husband. He does everything for you. He provides for you. He looks after you. He's earning. You're not working. And they just made me feel so worthless and so ungrateful, like I should be so grateful to them. They never once, in the 10 years that I was married, they never once gave me a ring. And in Asian culture, when someone gets married, gold is a big part of the wedding ceremony. You are given a certain amount of gold. It'll usually be a whole set. So you'll have earrings, you'll have necklace, you'll have bracelets, you'll have bangles, you have a whole set of pure gold. So you can imagine it's worth a lot of money. My in-laws didn't even give me a ring. And to me, that kind of symbolized the fact that they had never accepted me. They never wanted him to marry me. They didn't know at the time when we got married because he refused to tell everybody. He kept it a secret for about 2-3 years. He refused to tell everybody, even though I said to him, they need to know they're your family. You should tell them that you're married. His excuse was that, well, my father will never accept it because you're a divorcee, you've got 2 kids. You're Bengali, you're not Pakistani, you're not from there, they haven't chosen you for me. In our family, our parents and our sisters choose for us, they won't accept you. So for a while I said, okay. But it was when he was so abusive to me that I'd say, no, I need them to know, I need help, I need support here. I can't go back to my family because I'd gone against them to marry this person. When I'd married him, my mum, my sisters, had warned me and said, he's using you for a visa. You know, he's a young, good-looking guy, single. He can marry anybody. Why is he marrying you? You're a divorcee. You're 4 years older than him, and you have 2 children. You know, why is he marrying you? He could marry anybody. And I said, because he's a nice guy. He likes me. He likes me for who I am. You know, is that so hard to believe? And for them, it was. And they say, he's using you. Wait and see. He'll leave you in 2 years' time. He'll get his visa. He'll get his passport, and he'll go. My heart told me, no, he's not using me. He seemed so genuine, you know, he loved children. He clicked automatically with my 6-year-old. He got on so well with my 6-year-old. So I assumed that he's not lying, he's not making this up, you know, he is going to be a good dad to my children. He seemed to, everything I said that I liked, disliked, was interested in, wasn't interested in, my values, my outlook on life, everything he mirrored perfectly, as if this person is ideal, this person is perfect for me. And it's almost like too good to be true. And I think whenever something is too good to be true, it usually is too good to be true. And you need to listen to your heart, and you need to listen to your instincts, because they don't fail you. You know, if alarm bells are ringing, if something seems too good to be true, if people from looking in your life can tell you that this isn't normal, this isn't right, there's something not right here, it's usually the case. So we tend to ignore other people, we tend to ignore our instincts, we tend to want to see the best in people and want to see everything through rose-tinted glasses. Take those glasses off, because they are fake and they are lying to you. When something is too good to be true, when there is alarm bells ringing, when somebody makes a comment, makes you feel uneasy, gives you a funny feeling, go with it, because it's not telling you a lie. You know, they say instincts are messages from your soul, and your soul, your subconscious can tell you when something isn't right. And we ignore these. We're conditioned in society to think the best of everybody and think the best of everything. When it comes to abuse and narcissism, you need to ignore those conditioned, what you've been brought up with, what society has taught you and what the environment has taught you. You go with your heart, and you go with your instincts, and you go with your soul. Don't give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't think the best of people. Don't ignore silly niggling things that don't seem right. Check the way someone is to members of staff, when they go to restaurants, when they go outside, to strangers. How they treat other people say so much about a person, and we ignore all of these warning signs. So, August, this is August, 3 years ago, it'll be 4 years ago now, August 4 years ago. So it's 2017, August 2016 it'd be. So, yeah, so I was ill with cholera, my kids were ill. The day before I flew back, I was admitted to A&E in cholera, in Pakistan, being treated for cholera. The family would not actually get me treatment, and I'd been ill for days. You know, I look back at my picture and see how pale I was. And that morning, one of the brothers actually commented, "Oh, you look so white today." And we joked about, oh, I'm Pakistani now, you know, because I'm in between. I'm not really fair, I'm not really dark, I'm in between. But they're fair because the Pakistanis tend to be a lot fairer. I said, well, I'm blending in with you guys now, aren't I? Because, you know, you guys are fair. But I literally could not get up that day. I was vomiting, I had diarrhea for days, I wasn't able to eat, I wasn't able to drink. I was laid out on the living room where they would all sit around on mattresses on the floor. They didn't even have sofas, they had mattresses on the floor where they'd all sit and congregate and chat all day long. So I was actually asleep on one of those mattresses. You know, I can't remember how many hours it was. People were coming, people were going, I could hear people, I could hear them talking, people would come and say hello to me, but it was like semi-consciousness, I wasn't fully conscious. But still they would not get me treatment. And the younger sister-in-law actually said that you need to go to the hospital, you need to get treatment, because I had this illness and you need to get treatment for it or you're not going to get better. You know, please ask them to take you to the hospital. And, you know, there was mention of going to the hospital, there was mention of, you know, being seen, but nobody did anything. And at one point, my husband and his brothers were sat around with his sisters, sat around laughing at me, saying that I just needed retail therapy. And my husband actually said, oh, she's fine. Just take her shopping and she'll be absolutely fine. You know, she loves shopping. You just take her shopping and she'll be perfectly fine. So the younger brother says, oh, you should have told me. I would have dropped her off at the mall yesterday. You know, she'd been walking around the mall perfectly fine by now if you'd told me. So it was a laugh, it was a joke, you know. They didn't care. They knew at that point I had cholera because they called it Heza. And I had no idea what Heza was. I know Urdu. I'd never heard of Heza. And I should have Googled it perhaps, but I was so ill I didn't think that. I just thought I had a tummy bug. To be honest, I just thought it was food poisoning. My younger son was ill with food poisoning. I just had a tummy bug, you know, it'd be fine, I'll be fine. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I think it was. Oh no, before that, they sent me shopping. I had to go to the tailor's at the shopping mall to pick up my clothes that I'd given the tailor to sew for me. So my husband tells his sister, take her to the tailor's, get her to pick up her clothes, take her out, maybe give her some ice cream or something, she'll be fine. So we walked to the shopping mall, which wasn't that far away, probably a 10-minute walk, walk around the shopping mall, but I literally could not stand up. I literally could not walk. I was half dead at this point. I could not walk and I was struggling. And I actually pleaded with her. I said, please, can you take me to the hospital? I'm really not well. I can't walk. I'm really not well. She ignored me. And I asked her 2-3 times, please, sister, please, can you take me to the hospital? And she ignored me. Again and again, she ignored me. And she took me back home. And I went and just lay down on my bed, and I was like half unconscious. And one of the nieces that I really got on well with, she came looking for me after a little while and said, oh, auntie, you know, do you want a cup of coffee? I said, oh yeah, that'd be good, please, thank you. And then she said, oh, they're all calling you upstairs, do you want to come back up? And I struggled to get out of bed. I struggled to get up. I managed to make the stairs upstairs to the middle portion of the house, which is where they were all at. And I stood at that door frame and I collapsed. Right in front of them all, I just collapsed on the floor. And it wasn't until I collapsed that they got me help. And I was taken to A&E. And the consultant actually said that I will get you well enough to get on the plane tomorrow to get back to the UK. And I was put on an IV drip, and I was there for hours. I have no idea how long I was there for. I was there for hours, and I could hear people talking around me. The sister-in-laws were with me, and they were talking about me, and they were telling people that I was from the UK, and that I was going back tomorrow, and that I was ill with Heza. And I was getting IV fluid, and I was dipping in and out of consciousness. Then they took me back home. The consultant has actually said that I'll prescribe some medication, so you won't actually get better. You will need to take this course of antibiotics to get better. This IV drip will only get you to the point that you can walk onto a plane and get back to the UK. But carry on taking your treatment and, you know, you should be better. They didn't get my prescription. They didn't get my medication. We were leaving at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to the Islamabad airport, so we had to leave the house at 7 o'clock in the morning. That evening, when I got back home, they had a party in the house. They'd adopted, the younger brother and sister-in-law had adopted a baby, a gorgeous little baby, and I absolutely loved her. And they adopted the baby, so they wanted to do an akika ceremony, which is when they name the baby and they feed lots of people. So they invited all of their relatives from the village, you know, their friends. The whole house was absolutely packed with people that night. It was so noisy. It was just there was literally nowhere to sit. And I was ill. And I was ill with cholera, and I had to go and lie down on one of the spare beds that I managed to find and just lay there. I couldn't eat, you know, they giving me orange juice. I think I managed to have some orange juice, but I was in such a state, and they were partying. And they wanted to do a fake ceremony because from the first time I went to Pakistan, I'd said I wanted to do a walima party, which is when you get married and then you have a party after you get married to celebrate your marriage. And I was 6-7 years married then. We'd never had a proper ceremony for our wedding. You know, it was a quick nikah at my house with just a few people. So I wanted a proper party to celebrate that I was married. And they were meant to do it the first time I went to Pakistan, but they didn't. So this time, you know, I really wanted a party. This is the night before we are due to come back to England, and I'm ill with cholera and I can barely stand and barely walk. And they dolled me up in a beautiful gown. It was a lovely one-piece dress, red and silver I think it was, and it was beautiful. It fitted me perfectly. Had I been well, I would have loved that, you know, get dressed up as a bride, you know, it was beautiful, lovely, you know, they pretended it was a proper wedding party. They had lots of music and they ordered a cake, they'd wrapped up lots of presents for us and they did the celebration, they did the dancing. But I'm ill with cholera and I can barely stand and I'm dozing off. And I see in the videos that they made that I can barely walk. I can barely stand, I can barely walk. You know, I'm dozing off just sitting there because I can't sit up. And this is 12 o'clock at night and they're having a party. Just the sheer disrespect and the sheer lack of empathy. Just appalling, absolutely appalling how these people can call themselves Muslim, can call themselves, you know, human beings even. It doesn't even matter if you're Muslim or whatever you are. A normal human being would not treat another human being like this. They laughed and joked that I was dozing off, that I wasn't well enough to stand up, that I wasn't well enough to walk or to have the party. You know, they were saying, oh, you wanted a party, we're giving you a party, what's the problem? You know, you're going to sleep, stand up and dance. It was just a complete farce, a complete and utter. It was like more humiliation. Like, you wanted a party, you get a party, but you get it at 12 o'clock at night when you're ill with cholera and you can't even stand. But that's all you're going to get, because that's all you're worthy of. You're not worthy of a proper party. You're not worthy of respect. You're not worthy of even a ring. You know, who are you? You're nobody. And I remember when I came back to the UK and I asked my youngest brother-in-law, I said, who do you think you are? You know, who are you lot to treat me like this? To make me feel so insignificant and worthless? What do you have, or what can you show for yourselves that makes you so better than me? You know, I live in the UK. I have a British passport. I'm a British citizen. I have given your brother a British passport, a British citizenship, British children, a British lifestyle. When I met him and he was in Birmingham, he had no job. He didn't have a proper place to stay. He didn't have 2 pence to his name. You know, whatever he's in Pakistan, he had nothing in the UK when he came to me. I picked him up literally off the street and I brought him home like a little puppy dog that I fell in love with. I brought him home. I provided him with a loving, caring home. 2 lovely, gorgeous children. I've looked after this person. I've cared for this person. I've cooked. I've cleaned. I've toiled for this person. I've spent sleepless nights crying for this person to just love me and to accept me and to show me an ounce of decency and respect. And he never ever does. When he was arrested in May 2020, during the coronavirus pandemic, he was arrested for domestic violence. But the police need something physical to tie him to an arrest. So although I was telling them that he's very verbally abusive, he's very emotionally abusive, mentally, financially, sexually, in every way, he's demeaning and humiliating me and abusing me and taking advantage, they wanted something physical. So I said, well, he slapped me. He slapped me around the time of the Pakistan trip the year before. I can't remember whether it was just before the trip or just after the trip. We were sat in the sitting room and he got into an argument with me over something. The younger children were about watching TV and so on, and he slapped me right across my face. And I was stood up near the sitting room window and he smacked me right across my face. Then again, during the pandemic, after I was out of quarantine, he was being so abusive that I would take myself off to the docks and just sit at the docks for hours and cry, or read a book, or listen to music, or talk to a friend, because I couldn't bear to be at home with him. But when I'd get back, he'd be irate, he'd be shouting, he'd be screaming at me. At one point he came out to the car and smacked the car really hard and said, "Get the fuck inside the house. Where the fuck have you been?" And I went inside the house and he slapped me. And people asked me, my 17-year-old asked me, Why did you not report him when he slapped you? Why did you not call me? Why did you not tell me? Why did you not tell somebody? Why did you not ask him to leave? Why did you not take action against him then? And I've tried to explain this to people, that a slap is nothing when you've been beaten. So he was arrested in May, 27th of May, he was arrested by the police. And he lied. He lied his way out of it. He told the police that I was the abusive one, that I'd been abusing him for 10 years, that he has been the loving, caring husband and father, providing for his family, and he's only ever wanted a peaceful life. He's allowed me to be abusive to him. He's allowed me to shout and scream at him. And he's always tried to dissipate the situation, tried to calm the situation down, and try to continue with a calm, quiet life. You know, that's all he wants, is a happy, calm, quiet life. He told the police that I have issues with my family, that I have issues with my mum and my sisters, that nobody likes me, that everybody's supporting him. And that the police didn't know who to believe. I didn't have physical evidence. He hadn't beaten me. He hadn't beaten me. So I didn't have any physical evidence to have him charged with domestic violence. And coercive control is part of law. And yet, how do you prove a case of coercive control? How do you prove a case of emotional and psychological abuse and verbal abuse if you have evidence? But even with texts, I had loads of texts in Urdu where he'd been demeaning me, where he'd even admitted to being abusive to me. But that wasn't enough. You know, I had no physical evidence. I didn't have a broken bone. I didn't have bruises. I didn't have cuts. I didn't have anything to go to a judge and say, this man is abusing me. I had no witnesses because my 2 older children were supporting him. Despite living in the same house as us, because we only spoke in Urdu and he always spoke in English, in Urdu, and the kids can only speak English, they didn't understand anything we were saying. So anytime that he was abusive to me, quite often his tone of voice wouldn't even change. You know, I've recorded him talking to me before, and I've sent it to my friend and I've showed it to my friend, and she is flabbergasted at the way he talks. He is so calm, level, not raising his voice. Somebody who doesn't understand Urdu would not have a clue what he is saying, and yet he is tearing me down with his words, and he's humiliating me, and he is hurting me, and he is abusing me in every way possible. My 3-year-old, when he was born, or when I was pregnant, bearing in mind that I hadn't worked for years now because he had stopped me working, even though I'd worked since I was 14, as soon as I married him and I had a baby and I was on maternity leave, he didn't want me going back to work. I was going to be the housewife and stay at home, and he'd provide for me. So when I was pregnant with my 3-year-old, he refused to pay for anything. He refused to buy anything for him. He said if this child was in Pakistan, he'd have a blanket wrapped around him and he'd be stuck in a drawer. He doesn't need anything. And I was trying to explain to him that we need pushchairs, and we need Moses baskets, and we need cots, and we need blankets, and we need all of the equipment that you need for a baby. Car seat. So much that you need to buy. No, you don't need to buy anything. So while pregnant and unwell, I started buying and selling online. I would buy old baby equipment and baby toys and baby clothes, and I'd sort them out, I'd wash them, I'd clean them, and then I'd sell them on. Excuse me. And I got really good at it. I really enjoyed it. I was loving it. So I'd drive all over Southampton, Romsey, anywhere that I could, Totton, wherever I could find anything that was at a good price, that I knew that if I cleaned it, if I cared for it, if I put some effort into it and time into it, that I could actually sell that on for a profit. So I started doing that as a business, and I got so good at it, and I actually made enough money to buy everything for my baby, and I got really good things for my baby this time. I thought, this is my last baby, I'm not going to have any more. I've been in poverty my whole life, so I've never been able to provide for my children, so this one should have everything he needs. So I brought everything for him that I needed. Then I was in the hospital and I had him. And I was really ill in hospital. I had a womb infection that went undiagnosed for 4 weeks. But his dad insisted that I breastfeed him. And I couldn't. I was ill. I tried my best. I tried and tried and tried. I even went to the Ashhurst Centre to get breastfeeding advice to try and help me, because I'd never been able to breastfeed my children before. I'd always been ill. Every time I'd had a baby, I'd been ill afterwards with postnatal depression or some other issue. So I've not ever been able to actually feed them properly. But I wanted to. It's not that I didn't. I wanted to, and I tried, and I was breastfeeding. But the baby would always, cry. It wasn't enough, and I was just physically unwell and bleeding heavily and pain all the time. So the Ashhurst Centre was a nightmare, a complete and utter nightmare. So I ended up going back to the Princess Anne Hospital and admitted with a womb infection. And all the while, my narc husband was forcing me to breastfeed. And when I kept telling him that I couldn't, that I was unwell and I just couldn't do it, he actually threatened me several times and said, I'm not paying for his milk. If you're not breastfeeding, I'm not going to pay for his milk. So he refused to buy the milk for the baby. And I think for 6 months, he never paid a penny for anything. He never bought the milk. He never, it would go in with our weekly shop for our groceries and so on. But there was a limit that he would pay for that weekly shop. So say, for example, in the month, he started off, he would pay £400 a month for the food shopping, which then started increasing as the baby came along and more expenses and things increased. So I had him increase that to a bit more. So his explanation is that he did pay for it, and yet he sat in that hospital room and told me, no, I'm not buying his milk. Don't expect me to pay for his milk or buy anything for him. And I was appalled. I just had a baby, and this man, who's the father to this baby, is telling me he won't pay for his milk. He's not paid for anything yet for this baby. So I've spent about £3,000 of money that I've had to earn during pregnancy, while I've been ill during pregnancy, and had to earn, often carrying heavy pushchairs and Moses baskets and cots and other baby equipment all over Southampton and the neighbouring towns, driving miles, cleaning, washing, sorting this stuff out, endless messages to people, delivering things to people, picking things up from people. And this guy won't even pay £10 a week for milk powder. That is what a narc is. That is how they work. They are not human. They are inhuman. They do not respect anybody. They do not care about anybody. They do not value anybody. The only thing that is important to them is them. And as far as they're concerned, you are a nobody. You do not matter. You do not exist. You are there to serve their purposes, to cook for them, to clean for them, to look after their children, to be a whore for them when they want to use you. He was arrested 3 times during that pandemic lockdown. So between May and July, he was arrested 3 times, domestic violence, for harassment and for sexual assault. He turned up at my house, forced his way into my house, twice in one day. So he turned up at 11 o'clock in the daytime, and I was chatting to a friend, and he turned up and he said he wanted to speak to me in front of my friend. So he did. He stormed out again because I brought up Pakistan and his family and how abusive they are, and he stormed out in a rage. He came back at 7:20 that evening, forced his way in, despite me telling him that I didn't want him in the house and I tried to lock the door. He forced his way in and then proceeded to follow me around like a puppy dog, and he would not leave my sight. I was trying to cook, I was trying to get food for the children. He would not leave, and he was following me around like a puppy dog. And at night time, it was Ramzan, so we were having iftari, But I got my own iftari, and I went to the sitting room to eat my iftari, and he had to get his own iftari. And he insisted that we actually sat at the dining table that day. So he helped me with the iftari, insisted that he'd help me with everything. And, he had laid out the table in the dining room and insisted that we sat down like a proper couple and ate our iftari together. Then 9:30, 10, rushed upstairs. As soon as he realised that I was going up to bed, before I could even get upstairs, he rushed upstairs, brushed his teeth, was in bed waiting for me, which he's never done before. So he rushed upstairs. And then he tried to force himself on me repeatedly tried to touch me, repeatedly tried to kiss me, repeatedly put his hands all over my body, and repeatedly tried to force himself on me. And I would not respond. I completely blanked him. Physically, he's bigger than me, he's stronger than me. I cannot physically fight this person off. So I just ignored him. I just completely blanked him. I just completely sent my mind somewhere that he just doesn't exist, that whatever he's doing, whatever he wants to do, he doesn't exist. To me, that wasn't sexual assault. I didn't think that was sexual assault. He was still my husband. He was trying to have sex with me, and I didn't want to. So I ignored him. And that was the first time in 9 years that I had not submitted myself to him. Anytime he's wanted to have sex, regardless of whether I'm ill, whether I've just had an operation, I've just had a baby, I've just been under anesthetic, I've just, regardless of how I am feeling, if he wanted sex, he would have it. And to me, that was almost like, because I loved him so much, and I'm a Muslim woman, you do not deny your husband. It is their right. He's denied me lots of times. We've had an argument and I try and make up with him, I try and comfort him, I try and hug him or touch him, and he'd purposefully shove me out of the way and say, get lost and leave me alone, and I can't stand to be near you. I think at 12 o'clock at night, just a few months ago, a few weeks before this incident, 12 o'clock at night, he'd shouted and sworn at me and told me how ugly and old and disgusting and vile I am, and how he cannot bear to be anywhere near me. He can't bear to look at me or share a room or a bed with me because I'm so disgusting. I should be grateful that he married me. If he hadn't married me, I'd be crawling the street for punters. I'd be a prostitute on the street. A handsome prince like him, I should be so grateful that he married me in the first place. And I think the day that I had him arrested the first time, 4 o'clock in the morning, he started again, shouting, swearing, screaming, threatening. He's going to make my life hell, just wait and see. My life isn't going to be worth living. And I thought, my life isn't worth living already. How much worse can you make it? There is nothing more you can do to me that you have not done already. My life is not worth living. So it was the day after this attempted sexual assault that I was talking to the DV advisor that the police had allocated to me, and I told her that he's forced his way in. He won't leave. I'm not sure what to do. Can I call the police? Can I have him arrested? What do I do? And she says, it's your house. It's not even named on your house. It is your house, solely under your name. It's your property. If you have reported him for domestic violence and he has forcefully come in, you can call the police and have him removed. You can ask him to go. If he refuses to go, you can call the police. So I went back, and that evening, 7 o'clock in the evening, I think it was, he was making stupid comments again. He was saying silly things. I can't even remember what it was. He was saying some stupid things. And I actually said to him, you shouldn't even be here. I haven't asked you to be here. Why are you here for? I asked you to leave. And automatically he realised that he's in danger of having been kicked out again. And he tried to backtrack. Within about a space of 20 minutes, he tried everything he could think of. So 1 minute he's shouting at me, he's threatening to divorce me, he's swearing at me, he's calling me all sorts. Then he's bawling his eyes out, he's grabbing hold of his head, he's on the sofa, he's crying, he's wailing, he's pleading, he's begging, he's hugging his kids, appealing to my better nature. Please, Azia, please, I can't live without you guys. You are my life. How can I live without you? I have to be with you. I have to be here. I've got nobody. Where am I going to go? All this stuff within the space of 20 minutes. And I knew at that point, this guy's a psycho. You know, he will never change. He will never respect me. He will never love me. This is all part of his act that he puts up. So I just adamantly, I said, no, you need to go. And I picked up my 2-year-old and I took them up to bed. Took both of them up to bed and said, it's bedtime, you need to go to bed. And I ignored him, totally and utterly ignored him. And I think he realised that he had no chance now. So he picked up his jacket and he was sat in the car for a bit. And then he drove off. Now, during the day, he'd hinted at who he was staying with. I had no idea who he was staying with at this point. But he'd hinted that it was somebody in my family, somebody that I knew in my family, that was part of my family. It was a couple, and they'd asked him not to tell me who they are because they knew I'd be upset. And he'd hinted about a beautiful house, better than our one, nice big house. And the two people I could think of were my niece and my sister. So I messaged round, I messaged everybody, I messaged my son, I messaged my sisters. Does anybody know where he's staying? Nobody replied. I asked my older sister, is he staying with you? No, she replied. Is he staying with your daughter? She didn't reply. I messaged that particular sister that he had actually stayed with, and I said, is he staying with you? She didn't reply. I think my niece said no, but it wasn't convincing. And the fact that her mum had not replied back when I asked, is he staying with her? I had no idea. You know, he could be with her, he could be with my sister. Who is he with? And I messaged my niece and I said, look, I really need to know. If he's staying with you, that's fine, but I need to know where he is, because I had the same issue with my first husband. If he goes into hiding, if he hides his address from me, I cannot serve papers on him. I cannot tell the solicitor where he is staying. I need an address. So if he's staying with you, then please tell me, because I need to know. She immediately replied back, how dare you accuse me of these things? It is a sin to accuse people without knowing. You are accusing me. And she blocked me. She blocked me on Facebook, she blocked me on WhatsApp, she just blocked me. Bearing in mind, I had just been through hell for weeks with no help and support from anybody in my family. My niece, who lives 2 minutes away, nobody was asking me, are you okay? You know, I'd taken an overdose because I just literally could not go on. And still nobody had asked me, are you okay? And just a few days before that, when I'd said to my niece that I'm so hurt that my family do not care about me at all. Nobody cares whether I'm alive or I'm dead. You know, we've got no income. Are we able to pay for our food? Are we able to pay for our house, our bills? And nobody had asked. And suddenly she goes and blocks me. And this is the niece who got kicked out of her house at 17, who her parents and my mum refused to accept, who said that she was so appalling in her behaviour that they would not accept her in the house. And they kicked her out. And when I asked them, where is she going to go? Where is she going to stay? They said they don't care. She can go anywhere. They don't care. She's just not going to stay in the house. And I turned around and said, no, you can't kick a 17-year-old girl out on the street with nowhere to go. That is disgusting. You don't do that. Regardless of who she is, what she's done, she's still your daughter. Who does that? And I said, she can stay in my house. My son will move in with me, and she can have his bedroom, and she can stay as long as she needs. That's fine. All the time she was young and she was growing up, she would spend a lot of time with us. You know, she's a few years older than my oldest son, so they grew up together. They were quite good friends. They were quite close. She was always with us. So for me, to throw her out on the street and to show, you know, just unbelievable people. So she stayed with me for a year. Then when she wanted to get married, again, nobody was supporting her, nobody was helping her. She messaged me directly saying, you know, she was having issues, she needed to get married. But nobody was helping her, nobody was supporting her. Immediately, I said, fine. I said, you know, I did the nikah ceremony in my house. I have never ever cooked for anybody. I never cooked for people because of how humiliated I have felt. My mum has always laughed and mocked at my cooking. It humiliated me. So I cooked for her guests. It wasn't a very big, you know, there was a few guests. It wasn't major. But for me, it was a big deal because I hate cooking for people. I hate people coming to my house. I'm so embarrassed. So it feels so humiliated and just, you know, I can't cook. As far as I'm concerned, I can't cook. How can I cook for people? So But I did, because my niece needed me. So I cooked for her guests. I did her nikah. I got her married. Her mum and dad didn't come. His mum and dad didn't come. My mum didn't come. My sisters, my brother, nobody came. But that was okay. She got married. And here she is, just a few years later, and I'm asking her for help. And she blocks me. Just like that. So I only had my sister's house left, you know. So I suspected he was at my sister's house. And she lives 20 minutes away. So I got 2 bags full of his stuff, put it into my boot. I drove down to her house about 8:30 at night. He'd left about 7:30, so I waited about an hour or so, and I drove down to her house. I knew he'd be at home at that time because it was coming up to iftari time, and he'd have to break his fast and he'd have to eat his food. So he'd be at home, wherever he was, he'd be at home. So I drove down there. No sign of his car outside her house, on her street. Okay, so I felt a bit better. Okay, he's not here. I thought, let me just check around. You know, there are quite a few roads right next to her road. Let me just check. So I happened to turn left off her road. Lo and behold, his car is parked there. I was shocked. I kind of was expecting him to be there, but to see it blatantly like that in front of me with him parked there, and with a sister that I didn't even know spoke to him. I didn't even know they had any connection, that she'd ever spoke to him without me being there. You know, that he didn't get on with my family. He never got on with my family. He never spoke to anybody. He never got on with anybody. So for her to house him, I drove back round again and I dumped the 2 bags on her doorstep, and I texted her and I said, you're welcome to keep him. I've put his stuff there. You need a lodger. He needs somebody where to stay. Perfect situation.